Keep it real, revealing conversations with the most interesting people in the hotel industry. Produced by Parclane.
How do you do? My name is Alan Young, and I have the pleasure to introduce Daniel Melnyk, the founder of Parclane today. Welcome, Daniel.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's awesome for you to be chatting with me today. I think it's really important for people to get to know Parclane through its people. Our industry is super duper relationship based. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and the genesis of Parclane?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, hospitality is a people business first. The assets that we have, these, giant big boxes are nothing without the heart and soul of the people behind them. And I think that's what makes our industry so special. So I identify as a hotelier first. I'm a hotelier through and through. I did cross over to the dark side of technology. I've dabbled in other areas of the world and other verticals. But, there's something about hospitality that once it gets into your bloodstream, it's with you for life. So my background, I came up through operations, started working switchboard at a full service Marriott when I was, I think 19 or 20 years old. So I've kind of run the gamut of operations, guest services, bell, valet, in-room dining, and over the years progressed my career through accounting, was good with numbers. So they said, oh, you should work in revenue. Then they realized I was talkative. So they said, oh, maybe you should try sales. And so, it kind of ran the full circle. And that's really how I got started in the industry.
Being involved in the industry, it's kind of weird. It's incestuous. It's insulated at times, and people know people, etc. And one thing that I've always been amazed at is hotel travel technology companies that start because the CEO or COO or somebody within the upper levels of that company took a plane flight somewhere and thought, ooh, here's a better way for me to go ahead and organize flights, itineraries. And then somebody, CEO of a company says, oh, I can go ahead and start this hospitality tech company because I stay at Marriott a lot. So yes, I think they come up with great ideas. But my question to you is, how important is it to have the hospitality, hotel knowledge, operations knowledge when you're building out a product that's highly focused?
No disrespect to those other founders. I have tremendous respect for everyone who, puts themselves out there and comes up with an idea and takes it to market. But I feel like in the hospitality industry, we have a very unique way of operating our assets. We deal with perishable inventory. We have very, very complex technology stacks. The movement of people, the movement of money, the, multiple different sales pipelines that we have, the different profit centers. There's a lot of complexity here. And if you don't come from the industry and you haven't really worked your way through that or been deeply embedded in it for a number of years, I think that's lost on a lot of people. And, it's easy to look at it from an outsider perspective and say, hey, I could solve this. I could make this easier as a customer. But if you don't have that internalized knowledge, I do think that there are gaps that you're just simply not aware of because you just don't have the experience.
And so when you're building out Parclane, and it's you and a number of others, when you were building it out, how were you building out your use cases to figure out this is the right path to take as we develop Parclane because it's, the right thing to do?
So much of it was really just built on my experience in the field. I've been director of sales and marketing. I've been a vice president of sales. I have led sales teams. I've led commercial strategy teams. I've opened independent assets. I've worked for large brands, full service brands like Marriott as a franchisee. So I've really seen a lot of the different ways hotel companies operate. And, one of the things that was very consistent through all of this, particularly in hotel sales offices, was just the fact that regardless of what flag you fly, or if you even fly a flag at all, the sales process was very, very linear, and it was very, very similar from property to property. But in every case, everyone was challenged in the same places, so it was a very even playing field in a sense of didn't matter who you were, you had the same challenges in your sales office. And so for me, I think about my experience going, okay, I have problem A over here. I want to solve this. I would go out to market as a sales leader or commercial leader and say, okay, how do I solve this? What can I buy? What can I do to solve this? Then, you'd look at problem B and you'd go, okay, how do I fix this? And that was really my experience that led me to go, this is broken. This is not working. And, I spent a lot of money on technology and different tools and different platforms, different initiatives. I added headcount to teams thinking that would change things, bloated my payroll budget, my overhead, and didn't necessarily see the results that I wanted because, we were throwing a Band-Aid at a gaping wound, if you think about it like that.
Gaping wound. Well, I'll try not to think about it like that.
Yeah, it's a bit graphic, but if you have been in a hotel sales office recently, the gruesome nature of the business it's palpable for a lot of sales managers and sales executives.
Well, and I remember the days when I was doing PMS products and CRS products, and we used to call that open heart surgery, right? When you would take one and remove one and put another one in. And so I get it for sure. One thing that I think people need to understand is what Parclane is not. You are not a sales and catering platform.
Correct. We are not a sales and catering platform. We are a turbocharger for your sales and catering platform. We are an extension of that. But one of the things that I want to be very clear about, and it's confusing for people. And I've worked with a number of different sales and catering platforms in the past. Is sales and catering platforms are really focused on the lower bottom of funnel selling and servicing. That's where you're going to be tracking your events in your function diaries. Your catering managers are generating BEOs. Maybe you're pulling in PMS data for your sales managers to check availability of guest rooms. But those are bottom of funnel activities and very important in terms of operationalizing the great events, the meetings, the conventions that we sell. But it is not driving engagement or driving predictable revenue or sales pipeline for our assets.
So what's the trick?
I did some time, not in jail. I did some time outside of hospitality. So, and I think this is what really started to inform the approach that we took with Parclane. I left the industry. I cheated on us because I was very curious and worked for some very, very large e-commerce SaaS companies and really saw how other industries and other verticals outside of hospitality entirely were looking at driving pipeline for their sales teams. And, I saw that they were using technology that just, hotels, we didn't know what it was. We didn't talk about it. We didn't know anything about it. And that technology was really, really powerful at driving qualified demand into those sales teams and creating a really good engine for those sales teams to sell to. And we just didn't have anything like that in hospitality. And, I think I was laying awake one night and, just thinking about these challenges. And I thought, why does this stuff not come into hospitality? Why are we not using this? And that harkens back to one of the first things you and I just talked about was the notion of the complication of the tech stacks we have and this concept of perishable inventory. And so, you have this technology out there, but it just hasn't made it into our industry. And because people like me typically come up in the ranks in hospitality and stay in the industry, if you don't go outside and cross-pollinate or you don't get curious about what other people are doing outside the industry, and I'm not talking about just getting curious about your comp set or the brand down the block, I'm talking about getting curious about how does Uber do it? How does Salesforce do it?
One of the questions I want to ask you today is the challenges that sales executives face in their daily lives today versus pre-pandemic and how things might change in the future.
For as much as has changed in our world, there are a lot of things that have stayed the same in hotel sales offices. When we think about how business was in 2019, it was booming. RFP volume was flying. Our sales teams were drowning in new leads. It was like drinking from a fire hose. And, in some ways it was a good problem to have, or it sounds like a good problem. Lots of new business coming in, sounds okay at the top. Fast forward, we went through the dark days where there was nothing. And, in a lot of major markets in the US particularly, we're seeing group business is exceeding 2019 levels. So, for the sales managers in those markets, they are back to normal, drowning in leads. I think one of the big things that's changed with that, though, while the volume is still very high, booking windows are a lot shorter than they were previously because people are sort of rapidly returning to meetings. And, with this large gap or large pause, we're seeing people booking very, very short leads. So, response time has become even more critical than it was before. The other piece of it is, on the hotel side of it is, we don't have as many people on our teams, so in some cases we are experiencing labor challenges where we just can't hire the bodies that we need to bring our team back to full complement. Or in some cases, we don't have the budget to bring back the team in full. And so we're trying to do the same amount of volume of, RFP responses, new business proposals that we did in 2019, but, we might have 20% less people in terms of headcount. So, that creates a pretty big squeeze for our teams.
So if there's a lot of stuff coming through the pipeline and the top of the funnel's like full, how do you figure out which ones are good and which ones suck?
That's a great question. And a lot of it right now rests on, manual qualification. There are some tools in the marketplace that help to route leads by market segment or, geographic region to the correct seller. But I don't think there's anything that's doing a really incredible job of really qualifying the viability of a lead. How well researched is the customer? What do we know about the customer from, zero and first party data or past interactions? Nothing is really giving us a likelihood to close type of value. And that makes it really challenging because, as a sales manager, you're really just prioritizing based on this one looks big, or, this one would help my quota for Q1, or this one came in first. And so we don't necessarily have that North Star guiding light that's really saying, hey, even though this is not the biggest lead I've received today, this is the most viable and highest likelihood to close.
And so tell us what Parclane does then. How it deals with those types of issues.
Yeah. So, we're using a number of different tools within our platform and our product to really better understand what that customer journey looks like. So, we're looking at what's the behavior been on your hotel's website. So if it's a direct lead, let's say it's a social lead, like a wedding or something like that. Maybe it's a direct corporate lead for, holiday event or a smaller piece of group business, executive meetings, if you will. We're looking at, how has that planner engaged with you in the past? What kind of marketing assets have they engaged with? What type of website behavior are they exhibiting? And depending on what they're doing in some of those cases, how many interactions they've had in the past with your sales team, we can start to stitch together a profile or a lead score for that buyer that's going to help us understand, where is that person in their buying journey? What is their intent to purchase? How far along are they? And we can help sort of illuminate some of those things for a sales manager. For example, you might have a lead come in for a very large group that, it's just the planner has sprayed and prayed leads or RFPs into the marketplace. And they don't understand that your hotel simply does not have the capacity in your ballroom to accommodate this piece of business. Conversely, a planner who's very well researched and has, engaged with your virtual tour and already downloaded your capacity chart and reviewed your catering menus might have an idea of where you fit in terms of their budget. And if they're still inquiring with you, we can make some assumptions around the fact that they're actually a very well researched and well qualified consumer. And so they're further down the pipeline from a self-service perspective, and they're probably ready to engage with you on rates and availability.
Right. It's quite interesting. And I think today, because there's probably more of a pray and spray mentality, just because the industry is being pounded with interest, which is a great thing for us. However, it's easier from a planner's perspective to hit a button and go, let's send it to everybody. And let's see what we can get back.
And we've created that as hoteliers. I think we need to, as a group, take responsibility for some of that behavior that we have taught. And, that comes from a time when planners were racing for space. They would RFP, 10 venues or 10 properties to get a response from maybe 2 or 3. So if you think about it, if you're a larger organization that has complex procurement rules, you need to have multiple quotes, et cetera, and you're buying in a market that is compressed, you might have to put out, source, let's say 20 plus properties just to even get 3 or 4 viable options. And, there's a lot of research and a lot of talk in the marketplace, especially amongst the planner community, about the fact that they don't get responses from hoteliers. So I think we've created this monster almost where they are spraying and praying because they can't do their jobs if we're not responding, or we're not responding in a timely fashion to them. You see hotels that are responding 3, 4, 5 days after a piece of business comes in, and that's just not realistic, especially if it's a short lead opportunity, which a lot of what we're seeing right now is.
Yeah, I was talking to a lady the other week by the name of Christy White, and
adore Christy.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah,
and Nolan's seeing obviously the numbers that we're seeing today are not eclipsing, but they're better than what we saw in 1999 pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. So we're over the hump, I would say. So with the future looking pretty good, and this is my final question for you: what does the future hold for Parclane? And what's Parclane going to look like in 2 years and 3 years from now?
That's a, really great question. Obviously, we're a newer technology and an emerging company in the space. And I think that what's really exciting about that is that we're able to iterate and grow really quickly. We do not have the red tape and the complexity of an organization. So we can be nimble and we can agile and we can innovate and we can really listen to our early adopters and our early customers and take that feedback. I see there being a tremendous opportunity to use automation technology to free up sales teams' time. If you think about it, payroll is probably the single largest expenditure in every sales team's P&L. So if we can redivert that labor and reposition that to its highest and best use, that's beneficial for the asset owner, the asset operator. It's better for the sales managers. Nobody signs up to be in sales to spend their time manually doing tasks. We want to go out, if you're a hungry seller, you want to go out, you want to pound the pavement, you want to be scoping for business, you want to be out in the face of clients. And I feel like that's a really big component of what we're doing. And so as we're evolving our platform, we're really looking at all the things that sink time that can be automated by technology and should be, because it's substantially more cost efficient and it's better overall for everyone. And I think the other piece of it is really looking at, how do we unify the data that is so siloed? And, we've been talking about data silos, and I feel like for eternity now, and we still aren't there yet. And I think that, it was interesting. I was just in Las Vegas presenting at a conference, and we were talking about the number of data silos and how to even create the right data architecture and how to have the right infrastructure to really stitch this data together. And I think that's where Parclane can take a really interesting leadership role in that for hotels, because we have an infrastructure behind us that allows you to actually stitch together a much, much more holistic view of your group sales or your meeting or your event customer than any platform that's been in the space before.
Perfect. Well, listen, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Daniel Melnyk, founder of Parclane, and I'm sure we'll be chatting more in the future.
Thanks so much, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate it.
All right, cheers.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Keep It Real. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.